This is 5 Live Formula One with Jenny Gow.
Hello, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to qualifying for the Miami Grand Prix. It is round 5 of the Formula One World Championship. And I can tell you it's been a pretty exciting lead up to this, not just because it's Miami, not just because we're here at the Hard Rock Stadium, the home of the Miami Dolphins, and this is the first time we've ever come to Miami and it feels like the biggest race in history, but also because we've had 3 different drivers from 3 different teams setting the fastest times so far in each of the practice sessions. Jolyon Palmer is standing by to talk us through what should be a fascinating qualifying. And Jolyon, this is a track that can trip you up easily. It wants to welcome you into the barriers, and we've seen plenty of people slipping up, haven't we?
We have. We've had Valtteri Bottas in the first practice spun at turn 7, which is a bit of a long left-hander, slowing all the way through halfway around the lap. And it has been a corner to catch drivers out. But the other corner that's caught drivers out, caught Carlos Sainz out in practice yesterday as well in the Ferrari, and Esteban Ocon out in the Alpine, is turn 13, a left-hander that then goes into a very, very tight chicane towards the end of the lap. And in fact, it caught Esteban Ocon out to the extent that he won't even be in this qualifying session. He damaged his chassis by having that crash in this morning's practice. So this track, new track, street circuit sort of feel to it. And, it's tricky for the drivers.
So 19 cars will take to the track during this session. As you just heard there, Esteban Ocon for Alpine won't have any presence in qualifying. He'll have to ask the stewards a written submission to say, please, can I take part in the race? He'll be allowed, I'm sure, but that's where we are at the moment. Jack Nicholls will also guide us through commentary. And Jack, 3 different drivers from 3 different teams, fastest in each of the practice sessions. Does that mean that the door is wide open for any of those 3 teams to potentially get pole?
I think it's a long way for Mercedes, really, based on what we saw this morning. Yesterday looked encouraging, today less so. I think Sainz is going to be in trouble in terms of getting actual pole position, but I think certainly Leclerc, Verstappen, and maybe even Perez are in the mix for pole here, because Perez was quickest in free practice earlier on today. Verstappen's had a little bit of running, so he's a little bit of missed running, so he's maybe slightly behind the curve, but barely, admittedly. So I think it's going to be one of those 3. I'd be surprised if Mercedes are in the mix, but if they can get a second row grid start, that would be tremendous for them.
George Lucas has just walked across from the Mercedes team towards the back of the garage. Earlier on today, Michelle Obama was here taking in the sights of free practice 3. And I think there's a lot of excitement around this race weekend. The paddock is the busiest paddock, Jolyon Palmer, I think I've potentially ever seen in Formula One. There's just a level of excitement that I've not seen at other races.
It's incredible, isn't it? Just walking through the paddock to get to the commentary box, which is towards the end of the grid, the final corner. And you're walking through, and the roar of just the not really like cheers from the crowd, but just the volume of people is making such a racket. It's like the sound of a car firing up. It's so busy down there. Grandstands packed. It's been such a razzmatazz weekend, so much that the Americans have done here to make it feel like a real festival to come to Miami for the first time. And we're getting now to the crunch time, the first real meaningful moment of action.
Yep, we will see whoever is going to set the fastest lap around this brand new Miami circuit, the Miami International Autodrome. It is 5.412 kilometers long. They'll do 57 laps tomorrow when the race gets underway. An 8:30 p.m. race start as well. It's quite unusual for us to get a race underway at 1:30. Anthony Hamilton, Lewis's father, just walks behind me. Hello, sir. I won't bother him at the moment, but Lewis Hamilton looking a little uncomfortable earlier on today. Things looked a little bit improved yesterday, but what can Mercedes do? Can they fight back? Can they find something? As you can hear the crowd in the grandstands getting themselves pumped up, because Jack Nicholls, 30 seconds to go until we go for qualifying.
And you know what? It's also going to be really interesting in Q1 even, because Esteban Ocon's out, so there's only 4 cars that will be eliminated, but the Williams has looked quick at certain points, especially with Albon. The Haas has looked quick at certain points with Magnussen. The Alfa Romeo's looked quick. The Aston Martin looked quick with Sebastian Vettel. He was 5th quickest in 3rd practice earlier on today. So I can't even call Q1, you know. Who are you thinking for Q1?
It's incredibly tough to say. The practice session earlier on just threw the cat amongst the pigeons in a big way right at the end, didn't it? With sort of track evolution, suddenly people that haven't looked good at all through the weekend came alive, like Mick Schumacher finished in the top 10 as well. Alex Albon's been solidly there. Both Haas drivers and Sebastian Vettel in the Aston Martin suddenly popped it up into the top 5. I mean, it was really an odd final throws of practice. So now we're into a green light and we're into Q1. I'm going to say 4 drivers to go out. One is Ocon, so 4 more with him. Latifi, Zhou, Tsunoda, and let's go for. Oh, it's tough. The other one. Maybe it's a Haas or Stroll.
I think Stroll.
Schumacher or Stroll.
Yeah.
But I've basically gone for the inexperienced drivers there, really.
17 minutes and 6, 5, 4, 3 seconds left on the clock. 17 minutes exactly now. Jenny Gao.
I'm just going to put this out there, and it's probably rather mean, but Hamilton did not have a good free practice 3. He's gone out in Q1 already this year. Any chance that he could be vulnerable to a Q1 exit?
Well, I think the last time you said that, I said, of course not. And then he did. So, maybe.
I still think
of course not, but...
Mercedes showed much better pace yesterday. They didn't this morning, but I caveat a lot of this morning's practice times by an element of randomness at the end, I feel, with the track suddenly coming alive. So there's plenty to prove still for Mercedes, but I don't think they're going to be threatening to go out in Q1. That would be a serious fall from grace.
It'll also be interesting to see how the tyres get up to speed, because we saw some teams doing preparation laps earlier. So you do your out lap, then another lap, and then start your flying lap. Kevin Magnussen is out in the Haas. I think red flags could be an interesting thing this afternoon as well. Do you want to be one of the last cars out on track, or are you then going to get scuppered with a red or yellow flag? Because have we had a red flag and a crash in every practice session?
Yep.
Yeah.
Bottas, Sainz, Ocon, all have found the barriers in each of the practice sessions. Magnussen's the first car on a flying lap. He was already squirming coming out of the final lap, just setting up his flying lap, coming out of turn 17, and then you arc right through turn 19 and start your flying lap. Magnussen's now halfway around it, picks a braking point for turn 11, the end of the first long straight. And I think track evolution is going to be a big thing as well. So these early laps that the drivers are on, they're good to get your eye in, get a benchmark. Magnussen comes through the section where Ocon crashed earlier on, and he's okay on this first flying lap. It looks like he's driving, hustling on really hard. But I do think the track evolution is going to be big. So these early laps will be good to get your eye in, but maybe in the end, ultimately, less meaningful.
15 minutes on the clock. Magnussen coming down to the left-hander at turn 17. If you've not listened to our coverage so far this weekend, the key corners really, as far as racing are concerned, are going to be turns 1, 11 and 16 and 17. The tricky part of the track, well, there's the right-hander of turn 12, really from there's turn 8 that tightens that left-hander, and then there's the sequence from turn 12 through 13, 14, 15 and 16. Those are the sort of troublesome parts of the track. Across the line comes Albon to go quickest, the 32.495, which is a long way quicker than Kevin Magnussen. Mick Schumacher did a 39.3, so that was particularly slower. Vettel is 0.2 quicker than Albon, so none of these lap times representative at the moment, really.
That Albon lap would have been slowest of all from practice earlier on, so the time's not quite there at the moment. Tsunoda now goes to the top, dips into the 1:31s. They're starting to get towards a better pace. Now Lance Stroll takes it to a 31.7, but still the pace not quite there. Looks like the track's not in a great window. It's so hot out there. Nearly 54 degrees track temperature. It might be the highest we've had all weekend. So the grip's just not coming immediately for these guys.
Yeah, it is actually. You're right. I don't think we've seen it higher than, I think it might have been 52 yesterday or something like that. So the sound you can hear now is Max Verstappen, who had to have a bit of a lift through turn 3 there, which surprises me. Now he comes into turn 4. Now the right-hander of 5. Now through 6 and 7 in the Red Bull. Over a little bit of a resurfaced patch. And on the power out now down towards turn 11. He's half a tenth down on Carlos Sainz, who's done a 30.8. Charles Leclerc's done a 31.3. Ricciardo now slots in between the Ferraris on a 31.2. But overall, it is just the front times that don't matter quite yet, because it's all about getting out of the top 15.
Lando Norris through into 4th place. Leclerc lost a huge amount of time in the first sector on his flying lap. He was 7/10 away from Lando Norris, who has the fastest first sector of the session so far. Then it's Leclerc and Leclerc, but overall it's Carlos Sainz who's at the top of the times because of his consistency. Max Verstappen, though, half a second up after 2 sectors.
Sound you can hear is Verstappen coming down towards 17. Perez is 3/10 up after 2 sectors on Sainz's time. The Red Bull on the power, drives towards the line now through the easily flat out left and right kinks. And Verstappen goes to the top. A 1 minute 30.235, 6/10 ahead of Carlos Sainz. Perez is following him through and isn't going quite as quickly, but he'll be ahead of Sainz, I think. Yes, indeed, but only by 1/10 of a second, half a second slower than Max Verstappen. Sound you can hear now is George Russell coming down into the left-hander of 17 at the end of the back straight. This will be our first benchmark for Mercedes.
His middle sector's good, is Russell's. It's 1/10 away from Perez, who's in 2nd. Here he drives to the line, he goes 3rd immediately. So he's ahead of both Ferraris. That's more like it for Mercedes. Half a second from Verstappen, but only 400ths or 300ths from Sergio Perez in 2nd. Mercedes then looking for the first time today like they're back at the pace they were yesterday, which is towards the front.
Hamilton goes and doesn't really set a lap time at a 1 minute 41.0 for Hamilton. So maybe he backed off his first and middle sectors, I think were all right, and then maybe backed off in the final sector, Hamilton. Well, he's going for another one again by the looks of things. He's coming into 4, 5 and 6 now. This sweeping sequence of right, left, right, left, and then tightens, and it looks as though he's pushing again, although he's had a bit of a wobble coming through. A big slide coming out of 8, and he's almost 3/10 down on Verstappen in the first sector, but that was a big sideways moment.
Just overcooked it on the exit. So onto a very long straight that he's still on now. Lewis Hamilton sweeps around a slower car. I think it's his teammate jumping out of the way there in towards turn 11. Now he's into the twisty part, and he's already on the limit of the rear tyres. This is where they've been giving away a little bit more for drivers through practice sessions, through the low speed chicane at 14, 15, and then prepare turn 16, where he'll get another big load of right foot throttle as he comes down, and he's now more than a second down on Max Verstappen. He's lost a lot of time again in that middle sector, so it's not been a clean first lap for Lewis Hamilton.
Valtteri Bottas has only just left the pit lane on his outlap in the Alfa Romeo. That's an interesting decision, Jenny.
Yeah, I'm just trying to contact the team to find out why he's so late going out. We've only got like 10 minutes left of the session, so clearly something awry for them. They did have a big spin and crash yesterday. They were out in P3 though, so yeah, I'll ask the question, I'll find out.
Hamilton 10th fastest in the Mercedes. Alonso goes into 7th, Schumacher is 8th, Joe goes into 5th place. Verstappen, Perez, Russell, Sainz, Joe the top 5, Ricciardo, Leclerc, Alonso, Schumacher, Norris the top 10, Tsunoda, Hamilton, Magnussen, Stroll, Gasly the top 15, and then Latifi, Albon and Vettel, the 18 drivers. Bottas on his outlap now. Ocon won't be taking part.
So for those first laps, Albon is down in the drop zone, having had a brilliant run through qualifying. He's down his 17th behind his teammate. Must have made a mistake or not hooked it up on that lap. Getting a replay of Hamilton, you can hear it, the wheel spin that he got out of turn 8. Just got wide at the apex and then was on the dirtier part. It's very slippery offline, and Lewis just giving it a bit too much juice coming out of the corner, and that would have cost him a lot in the middle sector. So that will explain why he's down in now 12th position.
Pierre Gasly has missed the chicane. Just a bit too wide on the way in and couldn't get across to the apex on the left-hand side as it sort of rises up to the left and through the right. At the moment, the eliminated drivers would be Latifi, Albon, Vettel and Bottas, but Bottas hasn't set a lap time yet. Vettel has, but not particularly representative. Half a second away from his teammate Lance Stroll. Now we've got quicker laps coming in from Sainz, from Leclerc, and from Daniel Ricciardo. Ricciardo's on a quick lap too in this middle sector. So we see this quite often, that you can go quicker and quicker on your soft tyre in Q1, but then you still end up doing only one lap when it comes to Q3, because that would be my natural instinct now, would be to say, will we see them run longer in Q3? But it never usually tends to happen that way.
The track is just getting better and better immeasurably at the moment. Everyone out there is looking to make a big improvement. We've got 8 minutes still left on the clock. Sainz clatters the curve through 14, the tight chicane. He's on a fast lap now. Leclerc's done the fastest first sector of anyone, and is a tenth up on Carlos Sainz through there. The timing screens is going to go a bit berserk now for the next 7 minutes, because it's just getting faster and faster. It's almost like a wet and drying session at the moment.
Carlos Sainz into the hairpin at turn 17, then on the power in the Scarlet Ferrari and out towards the line, and Sainz is going to go to the top here on a 1 minute 30.079. Still not quite the fastest lap time we've seen all weekend. Charles Leclerc may set that. Here he comes now, and he does a 29.4. So that's comfortably the quickest lap time we've had all weekend. 6 tenths ahead of Sainz. Verstappen third. Ricciardo is fourth. Lance Stroll has now gone fifth for the Aston Martin team, splitting the McLarens, with Norris in sixth, Perez seventh. Russell is eighth. Vettel is ninth. Zhou was fifth. Now he's 10th and in the pits. Then you've got Schumacher, Magnussen, Alonso, Tsunoda, Hamilton, the 15 drivers through at the moment, eliminated. Well, Bottas has just got up into ninth, so Hamilton is now in the drop zone in 16th place, ahead of Gasly, Latifi and Albon. Less than 7 minutes to go, and Verstappen has just gone second fastest, 4 tenths away from Leclerc.
Hamilton is on another lap and looking to improve from 16th at the moment. Russell also on a lap. Perez goes into fourth place. Russell's on a lap now from 8th position, but not actually improving now into the final sector. So both Mercedes Russell particularly looked really good straight away. Now, as everyone else is improving, they're not able to find the pace, and Hamilton doesn't look like he's actually improving on this one.
He's missed the chicane. I think, Lewis Hamilton. Missed the apex of turn 15, so he's gone straight on and kept going, but has lost his lap. 6 minutes and 18 seconds to go. Russell came through that time and did not improve. Went 800 slower than he'd managed previously and remains in 8th position. Fernando Alonso has just finished the lap to go 11th fastest. Zhou now 12th. Schumacher, Magnussen, Tsunoda the 15. Eliminated will be Hamilton, Gasly, Latifi and Albon. Fernando Alonso just had a little brush of the wall coming out of 16.
Yeah, touched the wall at the exit of 16, but yeah, all good on the car.
I'd almost suggest he didn't. I mean, he did, but like, it's by the tiniest amount.
Hard to spot with the naked eye. I think he just did have a tiny brush at the rear as he got on the gas there. This is the sound of Hamilton just going a little bit in too deep for the chicane at 14 and 15 and having to cut through that.
Jenny.
Yeah, just having a look at the McLarens, and Ricciardo sitting a really good time. He's currently 5th, 7th for Norris. They've done a lot of work overnight. They weren't happy with the balance of the car, said this track didn't particularly suit them, but I tell you what, right now, suiting them okay. It's only the first part of quali, but doing a decent job.
Yep, not too bad, but Stroll's in the middle of them, so it's so difficult to read.
Hamilton's going again. He's on another flying lap. There's only 5 minutes left now, so if he wants to put on another set of tyres, he's got to be pitting at the end of this lap, but he's actually improving now. You're riding on board with him. Down towards the final corner at turn 17. He's done a personal best in the middle sector. He's almost done his best first sector as well, so this should be better, but is it going to launch him deep into the top 10? It's not, because he comes into the pit, so he's going to take the new set of tyres. I think that's a wise choice, because he's in big danger here.
Yeah, exactly. If he completed that lap, he wouldn't have time to do another lap, I think, right?
No, he wouldn't. So he's had to come into the pits. He's going to come in, do a quick change. Mercedes crew are ready for him in the pits, like a racing stop here. Off go the old tyres, on go a new set of softs. And then he's got to get on with it. 4 minutes and 18 seconds left on the clock. Many drivers now on out laps or just starting a flying lap. Alex Albon from 19th now. At the moment, last of the 19 runners, which he's looked nowhere near like being through practice, but he's got to dig in. He's got probably a couple of flying laps.
His first sector is 9 tenths away from the quickest first sector, which is Charles Leclerc's. He's coming through the middle sector now. He's a tenth and a half up on Tsunoda, who's in 15th position, and that's not really enough to make too much of a difference. But as you say, he has got a couple of flying laps to do. If he can get a little bit more temperature into the tyres, or the tyres a bit more in the window, the more laps he does. Comes through 17, out across the line. Let's just see where Albon goes. Comes past the commentary box here and comes across the line, and he goes up into 14th, so he's out of the drop zone at the moment, pushing Tsunoda in, Hamilton in, Gasly and Latifi in, but I don't think that will be enough for Albon. Jenny?
Very uncharted territories for Lewis Hamilton, who's currently in 17th. His father's in the Mercedes motorhome this weekend, watching on the big screen, and this must feel very uncomfortable for the family, who have supported him all the way along, but weird to see him down here, now in 18th place.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where you're in. Oh, big lockup from the Ferrari into turn 1. Who was that? Charles Leclerc sent it absolutely steaming into the first corner and had a big old lockup. Russell goes up into 6th place. Tsunoda's gone 5th. Yuki Tsunoda in the AlphaTauri has gone up into 5th position, considering he was going to be knocked out a moment ago. Kevin Magnussen only goes up into 13th position in the Haas. Latifi is about to come across the line now in the Williams. Checkered flag, not out yet. We've got 2.5 minutes left of the session, so Latifi will get another run. 6/10 down in the end, Latifi, and remains in 19th position. Hamilton starts his flying lap now, down towards the first corner. There are other cars coming out. Now, this will be where we see whether Hamilton just goes for it, or whether because you've only got a certain amount of energy, right, that you can deploy, or is that not too much of an issue?
Well, you can't do 2 laps in a row.
Exactly,
well, you can unless he presets it, but I don't think he'd do that. He's got 2 chances to do a flying lap, and he is going for it on the first attempt. He looked like he had quite a lot of traffic ahead of people coming out of the pits now. Many drivers are on outlaps, sort of 7 or 8 drivers on outlaps ahead. Hamilton through the first sector split though, and he's okay. He's a 10th.5 up on Fernando Alonso, who's currently in 15th and on an outlap on the bubble.
He's going to need bigger chunks than that, I think, as he comes down into turn 11 now. Lewis Hamilton onto the brakes in the Mercedes, swings it into the left-hander. There's a Haas that keeps out of his way of Kevin Magnussen, hugs the inside as he comes past the Beach Club, then swings it left through 13, up the hill through 14 and 15, bouncing over the curbs. And now he'll come through the left-hander at turn 16 and out onto the back straight. Cuts the middle sector now, and he's 4/10 up on Alonso. So this is better, but at the moment I almost can't see it being up there with a Tsunoda time or a Russell time, and everyone else may improve. Hamilton's gone very early here.
It could be okay for him if he does a good final corner here. Turn 17, he's into it now, makes the braking okay. Washing slightly wide of the apex, but managed to still get on the gas, and he'll get a bit of a slipstream across the line as well. He could jump up towards his teammate. He goes up to 5th. He just goes ahead of Tsunoda.
Okay, so Hamilton up into 5th place. At the moment, eliminated would be Alonso, Zhou, Albon and Latifi. Those are the drivers who would be eliminated as it stands. Magnussen is the driver at risk in 15th position. Zhou Guanyu is doing a good job after the first 2 sectors and is a couple of tenths up on Magnussen's time. Albon is coming through the middle sector now, and he is a 10th down on Magnussen's time, and there's a lot of traffic coming into turn 17. Zhou's abandoned that lap, and now he's going to maybe start another one side by side with the McLaren. That was all getting a bit messy there. Here's Zhou's radio.
Bad traffic, last sector.
And that's what we were just saying. Zhou getting the traffic in the last sector. We've got 8 seconds left on the clock. Alex Albon's going to come across the line now, and this is his last lap, and I don't think he's going to be going through. Checker flag out. Albon takes it, and he is down in 18th position. He didn't actually take the checker flag. He got across just in time, but I presume he was pushing on that last lap. He was, so I don't think the next lap will be quick. Stroll's on a quick lap. Everybody else is starting their flyers, but rather conversely to what you might have expected, there's not a load of green times out there. Alonso, Zhou, Albon and Latifi, the drivers eliminated currently.
Alonso is improving. He's in an Alpine that's been pretty quick this weekend so far, and he's at the moment in 16th place with the checker flag waving. This is danger time for Fernando Alonso. That's the sound you can hear now. The Alpine heading towards the final big braking point, turn 17. He's on a much better lap. This should be enough. And then it's Kevin Magnussen who's under pressure in the Haas.
Yeah, and Magnussen's not having a great lap. His teammate Mick Schumacher's up in 10th place. It's a very impressive performance for Mick Schumacher. Here comes Alonso, out towards the line now. Cuts the timing beam. Where's this going to put him up into 6th place? So Magnussen will be eliminated as it stands. Vettel is on a decent lap, and he goes from 15th up into 12th place. So Bottas is the driver on the bubble, but there's no one really improving behind. Magnussen, Zhou, Albon and Latifi look as though they're going to be eliminated. Here comes Nicholas Latifi. Can he get ahead of his teammate Alex Albon? Across the line? No, he can't. Only by half a tenth or so, but those are our eliminated drivers. Magnussen, Zhou, Albon and Latifi, along with Esteban Ocon.
Wasn't far from calling it. Latifi, no. Zhou, one of the Haas's. And who else did I? Tsunoda did a great job, didn't he, in the AlphaTauri, up in 8th place. Kevin Magnussen really the main driver to miss out that we thought would probably be a little bit further up. He's 3/10 away from his teammate Mick Schumacher. Schumacher did a good job in 11th, and K-Mag for the first time this year solidly behind Mick in that qualifying session.
So the top of the order was Leclerc, Verstappen, Perez, Sainz, Hamilton, the top 5. Alonso, Stroll, Tsunoda, Russell, Ricciardo, the top 10. Schumacher, Vettel, Norris, Gasly, Bottas, the top 15. Eliminated Magnussen, Zhou, Albon and Latifi. Strange from Albon, really, and Williams, because, okay, maybe those were sort of fluky laps earlier, but he did enough fluky laps for it to feel like it wasn't going to be fluky.
He was just solidly quick through practice, quick enough to be right in the midfield, but maybe that just shows how much you can flatter yourself through practice, because Williams, when it came down to it, adrift at the back. A couple of tenths away from Zhou. Zhou was on a better lap, but had a load of traffic, and I think he might have even made a slight mistake before. He caught a melee of drivers on an outlap and fully got out of it. So a little bit unlucky for Zhou in the Alfa Romeo. He's got so many drivers going slowly into turn 17.
Perez was the main one down the back straight.
There's so many cars block me in the last sector. We need to report, man. It's dangerous on the flying lap.
I think he'd already lost a good chunk of time before he got there, and he backed off quite early on rather than trying to complete the lap of drivers that were trying to get out of the way, but there's just so many all preparing their own laps. Magnussen went in too deep at turn 11, and that was where he lost a chunk of time on his flying lap then.
So Magnussen not making it through for Haas at their home Grand Prix, or one of their 2 home Grand Prix now. Schumacher in 11th place though with a solid effort. The McLarens slid down a little bit. Hamilton got up there into 5th place in the end, ahead of Fernando Alonso, but it still looks as though, well, it's difficult to work out from Q1 often, isn't it? Who did what, who did another run, but because the Mercedes pace looks a little bit more encouraging, but then Alonso and Stroll doing good laps, and Alonso you maybe expect, Stroll you probably wouldn't expect to be up there in 7th place. Same is true of Tsunoda.
It's tremendously close. From Hamilton in 5th to Bottas in 15th, there is 4.5 tenths. 10 drivers separated by 4.5 tenths, and that's now going to determine if you can be well inside the top 10 now in qualifying, make it into Q3 and maybe be best of the rest, or start in 15th and have a slim chance of some points on Sunday. So it's fine margins around a 19 corner lap where we've seen so many mistakes. These laps right at the death, they're really critical. It didn't even come down to a lot of the drivers. I guess the ones that went out, they just didn't manage to improve right at the end, whereas the likes of Hamilton, the likes of Fernando Alonso could dig in and haul it back.
Leclerc quickest. Verstappen 2nd. Perez 3rd, Sainz 4th, Hamilton 5th. Alonso, Stroll, Tsunoda, Russell and Ricciardo the top 10. Eliminate, we'll see what happens in this second part of qualifying. Beautiful sunny day in Miami. .5 degrees. The air temperature at 51.8 degrees. And we're going to be doing an update into 5 Live in a moment as we get ready for this second part of qualifying. And a reminder that the new rules this year mean that you don't have to start the race on whatever you do qualifying on in Q2. So everyone will be heading out on the soft compounder tyres. And the battle to be in the top 10 is going to be very tight, because you're going to need to be on track at the absolute last minute, ideally. And we saw some drivers starting the final part of the session with sort of 10 seconds to go, which is fairly rare. And the grandstands, I have to say, absolutely packed for qualifying. We've had the first part of qualifying. Kevin Magnussen, Zhou Guanyu, Alex Albon and Nicholas Latifi all eliminated along with Esteban Ocon. Mercedes are looking a little stronger. Hamilton ended the session 5th quickest. Charles Leclerc was fastest. We're into Q2 now, which is the battle to get into the top 10, and it's on Sports Extra. Q2 then.
It was up for grabs, really, wasn't it, between the Ferraris and Red Bull in that first part. Charles Leclerc a few tenths quicker than Max Verstappen, but then it was 2 Red Bulls in 2nd and 3rd, and then Carlos Sainz in 4th. Sainz 6 tenths away from his teammate. Hasn't looked like he's recovered today from the crash he had yesterday. The Ferraris and Red Bulls should be safe, though, through this part of qualifying. It's about who's going to go out in the bottom 5. Again, it's so tight to try and call it.
Jenny.
Yeah, just having a think about Carlos Sainz, and I actually think he's done a really good job during that session. He's not had the plain sailing weekend that he would have wanted, crashed out yesterday, crashed out in the last couple of races as well. So confidence building key for him. He knows he's got the speed in him at this circuit. We saw that just before he crashed out yesterday, doing a really good fast run on the medium tyres. So he needs to go out there, remain consistent, remain calm, and see if he can carry on performing like he did. Finish 4th fastest in the last section behind Perez, Verstappen and Leclerc, who was fastest.
Is it a big weekend for Sainz? I mean, they're all big weekends, but, you know, after 2 retirements.
It depends what he's after. If he's after the championship still, then he's got to try and win this race. He's really got to make this qualifying count, get on terms with Leclerc and ideally beat him. But, you know, is that even already gone for him? In which case he's just after stabilising his season, then a top 3 or 4 is okay, and another podium finish like he got a couple of times at the start of the year. That's okay just to reset for Carlos. But if he's got aspirations of beating Leclerc this season and Verstappen, and the top 2 again were the top 2 in Q1, if he's got aspirations of getting in that mix, he's got to start to do it. This is race 5 now, and he's made quite a few errors.
Does he have those aspirations?
You'll have to ask him. I think he certainly did. It's tricky, though, when you have a run of spins and he's not had the pace of Leclerc. He's been very close, actually, but just a tenth in the end of qualifying he's been missing. I think he just needs a solid weekend, really. But if you're hoping to be the champion and you've got a big deficit, a solid weekend's not really enough.
We've got, for those of you who need a resync, we've got 12 minutes and 50, 49, 48, 47 seconds left. Mick Schumacher coming through turn 8 now after a really strong drive, actually, in Q2. We spoke about it a little in free practice, how tough it will be for Schumacher up against an experienced and quick driver like Magnussen. And it has been a challenge for him so far this season, but it's been a very good qualifying session so far. He's currently on a lap. Everybody in the top 10 out on circuit now. We have I thought I was going mad for a minute there, because we have only had Q1, haven't we? But it is the top 10 on the timing screens that are the only drivers out of the pits. Now finally Yuki Tsunoda's left, so I thought I was going mad there for a moment. But Tsunoda, Gasly, Alonso, Stroll and Vettel all waiting in the pit lane at the moment as Schumacher gets onto the brakes into the hairpin. Leclerc's set the fastest middle sector of anyone. Sainz has set a very quick first sector, which actually is 2 tenths quicker than Leclerc, but he's a tenth down in the middle. Here comes Schumacher across the line. He did a 1 minute 30.6 in Q1, and he finds 2 tenths of a second in Q2 to do a 1 minute 30.4. Leclerc now coming out across the line in the Ferrari, and he goes quicker on a 29.7, so 3 tenths slower than he managed in the first part of qualifying there for Charles Leclerc.
Sainz has just gone quicker, though, by only a couple of hundredths of a second, and the 2 Red Bulls are out there and seeking to improve as well. Max Verstappen does the fastest middle sector that we've seen so far this weekend. Sergio Perez, who's actually quicker than his teammate in the first sector, but he's lost a little bit of time in the middle. Very tight between the 2 Ferraris. Just 2 hundredths between them, and the Red Bulls are going to be right there as well. Here comes Verstappen to the line.
Into the pits comes George Russell. So he did an outlap, and now Russell is returning to the pit lane, and they're going to put him up on his jacks and back in. So maybe a bit of a sighter on old tyres for Russell, and instead of, was it an outlap? Yeah, no, it was he'd done an outlap and then he was sort of on a hot lap and then came into the pits, so maybe a sighter on old tyres.
he was starting a flying lap, and it wasn't particularly good for George. He used to love doing that for Williams, didn't he?
Yeah.
In Q1, go and get a side to it and then go for a couple of sets of new tyres. So I wonder if he's trying to bring that to Mercedes, because he did exactly the same technique out in before he completed the lap, which wasn't anything special, indicating it might have been used tyres, and now back into the garage. So he's going to be the last person to set a time now.
Sound you can hear is Lando Norris coming through the left-hander and out across the line, and Norris remains in 5th position. Hamilton now slots into 4th place. Verstappen has gone quickest to 29.2, 0.6 faster than he managed in Q1, so it's a big old time that from Verstappen, 0.2 quicker than Leclerc managed in Q1.
Hamilton's time is good, he's 5th. Is Verstappen, Perez nearly half a second down, Sainz is half a second down, Leclerc is half a second down, and Hamilton in 5th is within 0.6 as well, 0.595 down on Verstappen. So Verstappen's got a march on the whole field after the first lap of Q2, and Hamilton in the Mercedes is on a par with the 2 Ferraris and Sergio Perez. It's a much better lap from him.
So it is still the Red Bulls 1st and 2nd, the Ferraris 3rd and 4th, Hamilton in 5th, Norris 6th, Schumacher 7th, Bottas 8th, Ricciardo 9th, Tsunoda is on a lap currently, coming down the back straight into turn 17. No red flags in that first part of qualifying as well, which maybe comes as a little bit of a surprise, but everybody will be pushing maybe a little more in this second part. Here comes Tsunoda now, cuts the timing beam, and he goes up into 6th place. Good lap that again from Yuki Tsunoda. His teammate Pierre Gasly follows him across the line and actually does go quicker, but only by a little over 1/10 of a second.
AlphaTauri showing a bit more pace then in the sessions today. Still then, that's Gasly 6th, Tsunoda 7th, but they are a chunk away from Hamilton in the Mercedes, who has joined that front pack in the first run of Q2 here. Hamilton has over 0.3 back to Gasly and half a second back to the rest of the midfielders. So that indicates how Mercedes on that first lap have found something and got back to the sort of form that they showed yesterday.
8 minutes and 10 seconds to go. Russell is on his outlap. Vettel is coming down to turn 17 at the end of the back straight. Neat and tidy on the power for Vettel. His teammate Stroll has done a 30.3 a couple of moments ago in 9th place, and Vettel does a 30.6 and is in 12th position. Very quick in free practice 3 earlier on, but not quite showing the pace here this afternoon, Vettel. Schumacher's back in the pits. No one is improving at the moment. So the order is Verstappen, Perez, Sainz, Leclerc, Hamilton the top 5. Gasly, Bottas, Alonso, Tsunoda, Norris the top 10. Eliminated would be Stroll, Schumacher, Vettel, Ricciardo and Russell. But still got a long way to go. 7 minutes and 20 seconds in this session. Jenny?
Yeah, just speaking to some of the teams, and they're saying that they're really struggling with these tyres. It's kind of very much a hit or miss. If you manage to get them operating in the right zone, it's payday. You're absolutely dreamy and it's breezy out there. But if you can't quite get them operating in that zone, you're swimming around at the back and you've got nothing. And it's very strange. That's what they're saying.
Bit of a moment there for George Russell coming through turn 3. And big moment at turn 4, and he catches it. Really no grip in the high-speed stuff here for Russell.
He's not there, is he? I don't know how he's managed to keep it out of the wall so far. Now he backs off the lap, having had 2 big frighteners through the first 6 corners. Big moment at 3, got a little bit wide through just a kind of acceleration phase, modulate the throttle, and then into 4, the very next corner, chucked it in and had a way bigger oversteer and somehow caught it and kept it on the track. But he lost a heap of time, and Russell hasn't set a lap because he came into the pits already in this session.
Bouncing, he says. So is that the sort of, we were discussing it a little bit earlier on free practice, if you're getting the sort of porpoising and you're losing suddenly all of your grip, is that kind of what he's saying? Going into the quick corners, he's bouncing and it's losing the downforce, potentially.
Possibly. It didn't look too bad on board compared to some of the porpoising we've seen, but I mean, just the floor hitting a little bit too hard and unsettling the car, and you feel it a lot more as a driver than you'd see it from the outside as well. So George obviously feeling that, losing the rear of the car, and 5 minutes 40 seconds left on the clock. He's in a bit of trouble here, George Russell.
Yeah, I mean, the good news for him a little bit is that he didn't flat spot those tyres, so he can have another go on them. 5 minutes and 30 seconds to go, as you say. Leclerc has gone now quickest, a 1 minute 29.130, so he's gone 700ths ahead of Verstappen. Perez third, Sainz fourth, Hamilton fifth. Gasly, Bottas, Alonso, Tsunoda and Norris the rest of the top 10. Stroll, Schumacher, Vettel, Ricciardo, Russell would be eliminated at the moment. Jenny?
Yeah, so just spoken to Mercedes about that Russell lap. You're absolutely right. He did go out there. It was a Saito lap, but if it had been up, he would have carried on and made the Saito lap a real lap. He wasn't, so he pulled back out of it. But could that be quite a costly couple of runs for him, I suppose? Didn't go the way he wanted at all.
If he was up on what, though? Just whoever's in 10th.
He's done a brilliant first sector this time around. So now he's on it again, same set of tyres. And I guess that was up on his Q1 lap as a reference. He was a chunk off it, but he is now a good way up on it. So he's managed to get the tyres probably into a better window. The rears are hanging on. He's into turn 11, now sweeping round the long right-hander of 12, and now he's into the really twisty low-speed stuff. 13, 14, the left-hander of the chicane, uphill into 15, towards the end of the lap now, and this is looking better for George Russell.
We'll get his middle sector split here. He comes through and he's 5,000ths down on Norris, who's currently in 10th place. So it's all right, but it's not absolutely rapid.
No, he's lost a good chunk in the middle sector. Not a personal best there for Russell. Only one corner to make amends now, and this is a little bit sweaty for him. Through into 17, the final corner. Now he's got to get straight and accelerate towards the line. He's not peeling into the pits. I think it would be too late for him. It would be nip and tuck if he wanted a new set of tyres. But he drives up to 7th place, so he managed to hook up the final sector.
Okay, so that's he'll get one more lap out of it as well. He'll do a cool down and then go again on those soft tyres. So the order is now Leclerc, Verstappen, Perez, Sainz, Hamilton, Gasly, Russell, Bottas, Alonso and Tsunoda. That's the top 10. Eliminated would be Norris, Stroll, Schumacher, Vettel and Ricciardo. You'd have to think that Ricciardo's going to find something. I think the two Aston Martins and Mick Schumacher are going to struggle, but Valtteri Bottas is doing a decent job.
It's so close.
Yeah.
It's so close. In 6th position, you have Pierre Gasly, 1 minute 30.1. 7th, Russell, 30.1. 8th, Bottas, 30.2. 9th, Alonso, 30.2. 10th, Tsunoda, 30.2. 11th, Norris, 30.2. All of those cars are separated by just a tenth and a half. It's so close. These last laps are going to be critical.
Hamilton coming through turn 11. He is pushing at the moment, Lewis Hamilton. So this will be his last shot, won't it?
He's finding some good time though. He's found a couple of tenths in the first sector. Coming through the middle now. He's lost a little bit through there.
6 tenths away from Leclerc, so he's pretty much matching his own personal best at the moment as he comes down the back straight. So he might find a bit of improvement, but I think this will be his last lap. He's not going to get another one after this as he sends it maybe a little bit deep into turn 17. Hamilton might not improve here, comes out across the line, and he does a 1 minute 29, does he? Yes, 29.993. 2 tenths slower than he managed previously.
But he does have a buffer, Hamilton, because he did a good first lap of Q2. He's got 3.5 tenths still. That gap that put him with the Ferraris earlier on, he's still there with Carlos Sainz and Sergio Perez's times. It's kept him 3.5 tenths clear of all the midfield. So that run of cars I just mentioned, that it's so tight between, they've all got to find 4 tenths or so to get ahead of Lewis Hamilton, who's in 5th place.
1 minute and 35 seconds left on the clock. Tsunoda is the driver at risk at the moment in 10th place, just 9 thousandths ahead of Lando Norris. Sebastian Vettel is the first of those midfield runners to start a flying lap down into turn 1, now through the left-hander of 2, then right through 3. The quick left-hander at turn 4 is next, arriving at 180 miles an hour and then about 270 kilometers an hour on the apex. And Vettel is doing a pretty decent first sector after being quite a long way behind his teammate on the first run. Right on the limit as he comes out of turn 8. He's a tenth and a half down on Tsunoda though, who's in 10th place currently. Lance Stroll, his teammate, comes through the first sector, and Stroll is fractionally quicker than Vettel through sector 1. Those are the only 2 cars improving at the moment.
don't think it's enough at the moment for the Aston Martins. They need to find a little bit more through the rest of the lap if they're to get through. This is the final throws then of Q2. It's the Aston Martins, the McLarens and Mick Schumacher in the drop. Norris is the driver. He's on a lap as well in 11th. He'd be the biggest shock at this stage. Ricciardo's still finishing an outlap. He's got to get around quickly. He's only got 23 seconds to start a flying lap, and he's in 15th.
He's in the last sector, though, which is the flat-out bit, so I think he'll be all right, Ricciardo, as he comes down into the hairpin left-hander. We're going to have the clock tick down to 0 now. Sebastian Vettel comes through. How far up the order is he going to jump? Currently 14th in the Aston Martin. Goes up into 8th place. Checker flag is out. Decent lap in the end, that, for Sebastian Vettel. Lance Stroll is about to come through now in the other Aston Martin. He was up on Vettel in Sector 1 and goes quicker and is up into 6th. Those are decent lap times, but everyone else behind is improving. Hamilton comes into the pits.
Russell's in big trouble here.
Bottas goes 5th in the Alfa Romeo.
Yeah, 9th place, and in the pits is George Russell. The two McLarens are making big inroads. Fernando Alonso's making big inroads as well. At the moment, all three of those cars are going out, but they're improving.
Here comes Tsunoda across the line in the Alpha Tauri, 13th currently. He gets ahead of Russell. Russell's out of Q2. Russell won't be through because Lando Norris has gone 3rd fastest. Gasly is right on the bubble now. Alonso in 11th. That's a bit of a surprise. He doesn't make it through. Pierre Gasly across the line. He remains in 10th place. And it's only Daniel Ricciardo now who's improving. Lando Norris is quick. He's up in 3rd position. At the moment, eliminated would be Alonso, Russell, Vettel, Schumacher and Ricciardo. It's Ricciardo or Gasly for the final place in the top 10. And Ricciardo is 100th up after the middle sector.
It's so tight between them. Ricciardo's done personal best in both the first two sectors, but it's going to be really, really tight, as always in this midfield fight. Through the final corner then, turn 17. Now he just gets on the throttle, drives to the line.
Checkered flag is waiting. The McLaren cuts it, and he doesn't do it. 14th for Daniel Ricciardo, a 1 minute 30.3, and that is 0.7 of a second slower than his teammate Lando Norris. Both Alpha Tauris into Q3. Lance Stroll into Q3. Valtteri Bottas into Q3. Those are the standouts there, I have to say.
Oh no! I lost it in the chicane.
Vettel lost it in the chicane.
Missed out by 86 thousandths of a second, 800ths, and he's in 13th. Russell missed out by 400ths. Alonso missed out by 300ths. It was so close. But those are the drivers that go out, along with Daniel Ricciardo, who didn't quite hook it up in the final sector, and Mick Schumacher, 15th. Haas then disappointing, 15th and 16th for them. Alonso I'm a little bit disappointed with, only 11th, and he's shown so much more pace than that through practice. He improved at the end, but by 300ths it was not enough to knock Pierre Gasly out.
Mercedes aren't back.
Hamilton's lap was pretty good at the start of that. Russell's been quicker than Hamilton through a lot of the weekend, but he did something strange with the run plan.
We are through. Yeah, baby.
So Norris being told he's through.
Incident noted of impeding between the two Spaniards, Sainz and Alonso.
Russell back in the pit lane a long time ago because he's not even in the car. And they did that, as you said, they went out sort of a little earlier than everybody else, probably because they kind of had to get that lap on the board.
That's the thing, he went for the used tyres, then the new tyres in just one set then, I think, all the way through. Started with a heap of oversteer, not a great first lap, and then didn't haul himself up enough then for the second. Only half a tenth away, but he's been the form Mercedes driver so far this weekend.
Yeah, sorry for that, I don't think that was good enough. Just don't have the confidence in the car today.
Didn't have the confidence in the car today.
And he had it yesterday. He was the fastest man yesterday. So overnight, Mercedes have fallen back a little bit, but particularly George Russell has fallen back. Hamilton ended up 7th and was safe to the tune of those 3.5 tenths still over Pierre Gasly. And he wasn't far away from Sainz and Perez. Lewis Hamilton only half a tenth away from Sainz, a tenth away from Perez. Norris had an absolute flyer in the McLaren at the death. That's going to add a little bit more pressure to Daniel Ricciardo, who somberly comes back in the other McLaren to 14th. Norris 7 tenths ahead of his teammate and finished that one in 3rd.
So Magnussen Zhou, Albon, Latifi, Ocon eliminated in Q1. 11th on the grid will be Alonso, 12th George Russell, 13th Sebastian Vettel, 14th Daniel Ricciardo, 15th Mick Schumacher. So, battle of the pole. It's looking like Leclerc versus Verstappen in a shocking turn of events.
Quelle surprise. Still out front, the top two. They're just perennially good, aren't they? They've got the pace. Sergio Perez took a pole in Jeddah. Carlos Sainz has had a few provisional poles, but not managed to complete the job at the end of Q3. But every time Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen, when it counts, are up the front. And in that one, they had a good 0.4, half a second gap back to Lando Norris in third position. Can anyone else join the mix, or is it just Leclerc v Verstappen? And if it is just Leclerc v Verstappen, who's going to win it, Jack?
I think I'm going for Leclerc. We're just getting a replay of Vettel going through the chicane. Didn't look terrible. You really see a difference. Some drivers really attack the curbs. Some drivers stay quite a way away from them.
Vettel there did just bounce through the second part a little bit. Maybe that's what he was talking about. It didn't look too bad, though. He didn't clout the curbs or do anything massively wrong. And that kind of makes sense because he's within a tenth of the drop zone. He wouldn't have done anything massively wrong and still been there. Good job from Lance Stroll, I should say, to get in the top 10, in 8th place in the Aston Martin.
You had Tsunoda out in Q1.
Let's just remember I was nearly right in Q1. The ones that I was wrong about made it all the way to Q3.
Yeah, great performance from Valtteri Bottas in the Alfa Romeo again. Stroll going through in the Aston Martin. Tsunoda and Gasly through there too, so that fight is going to be interesting. But really it's that fight for pole again between Leclerc and Verstappen. No sprint this weekend, just the Grand Prix itself tomorrow. 27 points separating Leclerc ahead of Verstappen. So it's such an unknown going into tomorrow's race as well. I think we've got a few people sort of tweeting in saying, what do we think about strategy? And you kind of presume a one-stop, but no one's done more. I think Verstappen did quite a few laps on the mediums earlier, but that's kind of it in terms of long running.
And that wasn't on high fuel either, which would add to some degradation. So it is a real unknown tomorrow. Chance of safety car, what's that? Is it high? We had a lot of incident through practice. It's a street circuit, you'd think so. But so far, everyone's been squeaky clean in qualifying. We have 5 red flags in Imola qualifying, 3 red flags through practice. So far, level of driving's been very high in this qualifying session.
Yeah, it certainly has. So Leclerc quickest in Q1 and Q2, ahead of Verstappen on both occasions. Norris getting up there towards the end, but that was his second run. Perez was a tenth of a second ahead of Carlos Sainz. And then they were on the same lap time, really, as Bottas. So I think Perez in particular has impressed me this weekend. I think he's got a shot of getting involved. Just based on the whole weekend, he's been there or thereabouts. Okay, he didn't get the lap time in Q1 or Q2, I will accept, but I wouldn't rule Perez out.
He was only a couple of tenths away from his teammate in Q1, a little bit further away there in Q2. He's capable of doing something a little bit extraordinary at the end of qualifying.
The light's about to go green at the end of the pit lane. And we're about to start the pole position shootout. Charles Leclerc versus Max Verstappen. Lewis Hamilton did manage to get through into the top 10. He finished that session 7th. But rather surprisingly, George Russell, who was quickest in practice yesterday in the other Mercedes, he was eliminated. Only 12th fastest for George Russell. That's where he'll start on the grid tomorrow. But now the fight for pole begins with Charles Leclerc versus Max Verstappen on Sports Extra. The Ferraris going out right together. Slipstreaming here. The Red Bull's not going out right together.
I suspect they'll separate towards the end of the lap, but there's 2 long straights. In any circuit there's a low downforce, you expect that the trade-off towards the slipstream is going to be quite good. It means the power of the straights is high. The Red Bulls they're not absolutely together leaving the pits, but they are one ahead of the other one. And it's, I think, Verstappen actually ahead of Sergio Perez as they leave the garage.
Jenny,
Yeah, Kevin Magnussen went out in the first part of qualifying, and I'm not sure many people expected that in the Haas, bearing in mind that Mick Schumacher, his teammate, went through to the second part. One of the reasons could be the fact that he had no radio for Q1, so he had no way of knowing what the team wanted him to do. In effect, driving blind without their instructions and help. So not ideal for Kevin Magnussen and Haas.
No, because obviously you don't need the team to tell you how to drive fast necessarily, but what your sort of traffic situation is and everything like that must be. Actually, traffic in Q1 with no radio is a tricky one.
And time management as well. If you're not just doing one push and back in, knowing if you've got time for a second flying lap, or if this is it, one flying lap and that's the end of your session. So it can make a little bit of a difference. They wouldn't be talking to the drivers as they're around. It's not Drive to Survive where they get every single thing coming through every corner. It's just silence when you're in your qualifying lap. So that wouldn't have impacted Magnussen. But in terms of the run plan, maybe slightly. And certainly the traffic would be a tough one when he's on a slow lap.
So 9.5 minutes to go. Everybody out on the circuit now, on their out laps. And Charles Leclerc starting his first flying lap. No slipstreaming now for the Ferraris. They are plenty spread out. As Leclerc comes through the right-hander of turn 3. Now down into the left-hander of turn 4. The Ferrari man looking for pole position. If he starts on pole, he's going to be in a very strong place going into the Grand Prix tomorrow with a 27-point lead and pole position. He's had 2 pole positions this season already, Bahrain and Australia. He's had a one-on, one-off in terms of poles. And if that run continues, he would be on pole for the Miami Grand Prix as he comes through the first sector. It's his teammate Carlos Sainz, though, who is quicker, only by 0.02 of a second, but quicker nevertheless.
Sainz has been consistently quick through the first sector, but then he struggles to keep it through the rest of the lap. Can he sort that out in the final part of qualifying? Leclerc bounces through the chicane, comes out of turn 16. We'll get a middle sector split for him as well. He's the first driver through it, so we've got no benchmark at the moment. But it's a pretty decent lap, this one, for Charles Leclerc. Carlos Sainz behind him, though, is going quick. He's matched him through the middle.
So overall, Sainz is quicker after 2 sectors, only fractionally. Verstappen is through the first sector and is slower than both of the Ferraris. Bottas has come through the middle sector and he's quite a way away, but this is going to be pretty tight between the Ferrari drivers. Here comes Leclerc. He's first across the line, a 1 minute 29.055. Less than a tenth quicker than he managed in Q2, and Sainz doesn't go quicker actually. 200 slower in the end, but that was mightily tight. Verstappen is looking good as he comes down to the end of the back straight. He is up on the Ferraris at the moment, set the fastest middle sector as he turns into the left-hander now of 17, gets on the power, has to do a little correction, little bit of wheel spin, drives towards the line. Is Verstappen going to get ahead of the Ferraris on this first run? He is, but by the smallest of margins, 0.02 of a second. There's 0.04 separating the top 3, and Sergio Perez slots into 4th place, and he is about half a second adrift. Lewis Hamilton, what's his first lap time going to be? The Mercedes driver goes 6th fastest, slower than Valtteri Bottas. Then we've got Tsunoda across the line into 8th place, Gasly across the line in a moment. They'll be on older tyres, used tyres, I'd have thought. But it is Verstappen, Leclerc and Sainz separated by 0.08 of a second.
Really close after the first flying laps there. Sainz is impressive to finally get a bit of pace and get back towards Charles Leclerc, where he's been at a distance all day today. Was quickest when he hit the wall yesterday, but hasn't found the confidence until now. Only 16 thousandths away from his teammate in second place, but it was Max Verstappen then, 600ths ahead of both Ferraris to be provisional pole. We've seen track evolution be quite high though. Temperature's scorching but dropping slightly. Just for a moment, track temperature nudged underneath 50 degrees centigrade. I think Hamilton was on a used tyre there potentially as well, because he had to run the extra set in Q1, possibly.
Yeah, that would make sense. Verstappen, Jenny, looking for his second pole in a row.
Yeah, he is an interesting thing if you look at who's had pole and who's gone on to win the race. Whichever team has secured pole position, that team has gone on to win the race. So there we go, a bit of psychology for you, a little bit of statistical information.
And the only one then is Sergio Perez taking pole in Jeddah and Max Verstappen winning the race. Apart from that, it's been the pole man wins the race in the other 3.
Well,
by the by.
Imola, of course, the pole man. Oh no, he did start on pole in the end, didn't he? In the end,
Yep.
but he lost the lead at the start of the sprint. But he was on pole in the end.
But he was pole.
He was double pole.
But qualifying gave the pole, not the sprint gave the pole.
No, I agree. But I guess
He was
we were
pole by virtue of getting the pole on the Friday pole.
Don't disagree, but I also think you're pointing out that the person who started first has won every Grand Prix apart from Perez was sort of the other point, which was still true
stands.
in Imola. Yeah, no, it still stands. 5 minutes and 17 seconds on the clock. Everybody just going out, doing their out lap, fast lap, in lap, and we've got 5 minutes and 5 seconds left. Cameron says, is Jolyon really saying that when he was driving he didn't have mode 7 until the end, Joe, as he's coming through Maggots and Beckett's in Q3 on the radio?
Braving it up to Copse Corner. Is that push now?
Yeah.
Oh, I'd have disconnected that radio in a heartbeat.
Have you ever
Can you
disconnected
imagine?
the radio? Have you ever been like, and just pulled it out?
No, but I have gone full Yuki Tsunoda and told my engineers to shut up at times.
Really?
Yeah, disconnecting the radio feels a really bold call because you don't know what useful future information you're going to miss out on.
And
at that point.
could you easily plug it back in, or once you unplug it, you're done?
Tricky. Racing speeds is pretty much impossible. Yeah.
You ever done that in a radio broadcast?
Yep.
Producer, sorry, unplugged.
Don't think it's the producer he's unplugging, Jen.
Oh, it's you.
Yeah, exactly. 4 minutes and 10 seconds to go. And, well, we're going to get going again with the second runs in a moment. But Verstappen did well there, because I said Leclerc. And I'm actually impressed by Sainz. Sainz's lap. He's the most impressive of the top four, I think.
But you didn't ask me about pole, and I would have got Verstappen.
You can say you can
thinking
have your own thoughts
I
without
teed it up to you, but I would have gone Verstappen.
Would you have? Oh, really? Would you have?
Wait, there's one more run to go. So, Verstappen is on provisional pole, ahead of Leclerc and Sainz. Sainz is right there, though. Sainz has had a couple of times this year been the Verstappen, had provisional pole in Bahrain and in Jeddah, and it slipped away from him. And here again, I just think track evolution is high. It's got to be done on the final lap if you're going to get the absolute maximum out of this qualifying.
Okay, so are we going to see a bit of a fight to be last? Because Leclerc's time, the first run, he was just straight out. He was gone. He's doing his own thing.
Well, they're not going to be first because Lance Stroll is out onto the track. 3 minutes left, and then there's a run of cars. Trying to look through the Miami haze, and I think it's a McLaren or it's a Ferrari. It's a Ferrari trailing him out. Charles Leclerc, and then Carlos Sainz. So they are going to go early again, the two Ferraris, but they're behind Lance Stroll.
Trijole says, I recently read they only gave Murray Walker and James Hunt one microphone so that they wouldn't talk over each other, but that would take all the fun out of #BBC F1. It's very true. Very true. 2 minutes and 22 seconds to go. Sometimes I'm not sure we can afford two microphones, but we've managed to put them together for this weekend. 2 minutes and 13 seconds to go now, and who is out on circuit first? Then it is Leclerc, so he's happy to just get on with it, and it's actually Verstappen ahead of Perez. So Perez will be the last driver on track. How much of a buffer has Perez? Do you think they would make Perez tow Verstappen or something? Has Perez not got enough of a buffer really to those behind? I mean, the buffer's quite big, but they were on old tyres, your Bottas, your Hamiltons, your Norrises.
I don't think they're going to do that. The Ferraris weren't interested early on. Leclerc's the first driver of the main pack to come through. He's still got Carlos Sainz behind, but the gaps were quite big, so Sainz could have sat at the optimal distance. Last year it would have been about 6 seconds for the slipstream on the main straights. There are long straights here, but in that first run nobody seemed too bothered about it. On the back straight now down towards turn 17, and Sainz is still there behind Charles Leclerc.
Leclerc is going to be the first driver across the line, then it will be Sainz, and then it will be Verstappen, and then it will be Perez, for the purposes of the front runners. Behind the top four, it's Bottas 5th, Hamilton 6th, Norris, Tsunoda, Stroll and Gasly, the rest of the top 10. But here comes Charles Leclerc now, the championship leader, 27 points ahead of Max Verstappen, and he comes into turn 1. The right-hander, slightly tighter than 90 degrees. Now he's through the long sweeper of turn 3. Flicks it left into turn 4 at 180 miles an hour. Drops down to just 160 on the apex. Whoa, a bit of a wiggle as he comes through 4. Now he's coming into 5 and 6, and the Ferrari fans are cheering him on. We'll get his first sector split here compared to Verstappen, and he's up by 1/10 of a second. Big first sector from Charles Leclerc. What's Carlos Sainz got? He's even quicker. Sainz is 1/10 ahead of Leclerc.
Again, Sainz is up on his teammate through the first sector. He was on the last run, he is again. This time by a little bit more. He's 1/4 of a second up on Max Verstappen. Leclerc had a real twitch coming through turn 5, but managed to hold it nicely. The crowd are roaring on this final lap at Q3. It's great to hear as Charles Leclerc goes slightly bouncing, slightly wheel spinning through the chicane at 14.
Through the left-hander at 16 now. The middle sector split for Charles Leclerc is coming up. He's 1/4 of a second up on Max Verstappen. Carlos Sainz comes through the middle sector, and he's about the same, but Leclerc is fractionally ahead, and Verstappen's backed off. Verstappen has backed off, so this is the chance for Ferrari to take pole position. One of them's going to do it. They might even get a front row lockout for the Miami Grand Prix. Charles Leclerc towards the line, cuts the timing beam, and Leclerc goes to pole. The only man that can stop him is Carlos Sainz, who comes through the final turn now. He doesn't do it. Ferrari 1-2 in Miami. Charles Leclerc takes pole. He's got Carlos Sainz in behind him, and a mistake seemingly for Max Verstappen at turn 1 means that he is not on pole position. Third for him. There's still more lap times coming in. Bottas is currently up in 4th place.
Perez is the other driver that could come through. He's on a personal best through the first 2 sectors. Can he get himself back into 4th to fight the Ferraris? Bottas has done a tremendous job. I think Perez is going to nick it back, and he does.
He does. So Bottas drops down to 5th, Hamilton 6th, Norris 7th, Tsunoda and Gasly about to come through. Gasly goes into 7th place, and Tsunoda remains in 9th. So the order will be Leclerc, Sainz, Verstappen, Perez, Bottas the top 5, Hamilton, Gasly, Norris, Tsunoda, and Stroll the top 10. Now, I don't know that there was an error for Verstappen at the first corner, but he was quick going into turn 1 on our little mini sectors, and then he wasn't quick after that, so that would be my summation. But Leclerc waving to the fans on his way around the track.
So P1.
Let's go. Come on. Good. The lap wasn't great, but it's enough, so cannot complain. Thanks, guys. Great car.
Sainz only beat Verstappen's first lap time by 5 thousandths of a second in the end. Only 5 thousandths of a second in the end. Just getting a replay of Verstappen. Oh, it was through the right-hander of 5.
It
was the right-hander of 5 where Verstappen made a moderately uncharacteristic driving error on a push lap. Obviously Saudi Arabia springs to mind, but there aren't many of those.
Not many, and it's cost him pole position. He was the man on provisional pole, and he's down in 3rd. Sainz just pipped him by those 5 thousandths, as you said. Knew it would be Leclerc. Of course it would. Championship leader delivers again in the crunch times. He's so good at the end of Q3. How many times now has he delivered from not being provisional pole and then just banging one in right at the end of it? And he's done it again today.
And it's so interesting how Sainz was up on him in the first sector every time, but it just kept ebbing away for Sainz in the remainder of the lap.
Well, Leclerc had a moment not dissimilar to Verstappen's through turn 5 on the apex curve, and he just had a slight moment which maybe cost him a fraction on that last lap. Maybe why he said it wasn't the perfect lap, but it was good enough. And even though he didn't set the fastest first, he did set the fastest second sector and hauled it back for pole.
Now, huge cheers for the Ferrari driver. Ferrari, we say this all the way around the world, but they are a hugely supported team. The scrum outside of Ferrari hospitality in the paddock earlier on, when Leclerc was going from the hospitality to the garage, was absolutely mad. But there's a lot of Red Bull fans out there as well, a lot of Max Verstappen fans too, and he is only going to be 3rd on the grid for the Miami Grand Prix, and that's going to be frustrating because Sainz is in there. And how often we've spoken over the last 2 years in particular about the wingman, let's say, the number 2 driver, the driver that's going to help with the result, and Carlos Sainz has done that job in 2nd position excellently. Jenny?
Yeah, it's going to be really fascinating if you look at Leclerc with Sainz next to him, Verstappen, Perez next to him. It's a 200-metre dash down to a really aggressive right turn. And it's going to be wonderful to see these four guys in action who are clearly, a cut above everybody else with their cars at the moment. But my word, it's going to be a dynamic start to the race tomorrow, isn't it?
Yeah, it's going to be a really, really interesting Grand Prix with this lineup because, Red Bull need to be aggressive, starting third on the grid if they can take the victory. We will hear from our top three in a couple of moments. Max Verstappen third, Carlos Sainz second, Charles Leclerc will be starting on pole position as the fans now start to head out of the grandstands and actually they're hanging around now to hear from the top three who have pulled up on the grid, and we can hear from Charles Leclerc. He's talking to the former IndyCar racer Danica Patrick down on the grid.
Charles, you've had an amazing weekend so far. How does it feel coming off of Imola, where you had a little mistake, but this weekend you're commanding it and the fans are loving it?
The fans are crazy. It's incredible to be here in the US and to see how much the sport has grown over the past few years, and to see so many people in the grandstand. It definitely motivates us. And there are also a lot of Ferrari fans, so it's amazing. So the last weekend hasn't been great for me. I did a mistake in the race, but today went well. So we're starting on pole and we need to finish the job tomorrow.
A lot of straight line speed here. DRS is going to come into play. Red Bull's really good in a straight line. Are you worried about that?
Well, yeah, they are extremely quick in the straight lines. We are quick in the corners, and yeah, it will be a tight challenge tomorrow, and hopefully we'll come back on top.
Good luck. Carlos, what a comeback. High five. Good job. That was an incredible run. How did you turn it around this weekend?
Well, just building a bit from a pretty heavy crash yesterday. It wasn't easy at all to get the confidence back in such a difficult circuit like this new one of Miami. But yeah, I kept it cool until Q3. I think I pulled out a couple of good laps. Not quite enough for pole position, but given from where I was coming yesterday, I will take it.
What do you think you have left to improve on so you can get a victory tomorrow?
Tomorrow, it is going to be, I think, an interesting day with everything that's going on this weekend. I haven't done any long runs yet. I haven't put the fuel on the car and tried it. So tomorrow, laps to a grid will be the first time to have a feel, which could be quite challenging. But at the same time, I'm feeling confident with the car. Car is really good to drive around here. So I think we can do a good job.
Good luck. Max, you came up a little bit short, but on the other hand, you've also had a little bit of a rough weekend. You didn't have very many laps in P2. Do you think that attributed to not being able to get the pole today?
Yeah, I mean, overall, I'm of course pretty pleased with qualifying. I mean, I literally did 4 or 5 laps yesterday, so the whole day today was still trying to learn the track, trying to find a decent balance in the car. And actually, to be that competitive in qualifying, I was a bit surprised, because this is not an easy track to learn. And yeah, I think overall, of course you want to be on pole, but where we come from, I think we did a really good job. But yeah, we have to start making the weekends a little bit, less difficult, because like this, it's always going to be tricky. But we have a good chance for tomorrow. We have good top speed. I think the car is handling quite well, so I'm looking forward to that.
Drivers have complained a little bit about being so dirty offline and that it's going to be difficult to pass. You have a couple cars to get by. Where do you think you're going to be able to do that?
Yeah, exactly. It's quite slippery outside of the normal racing line, but we'll see. A lot of things can happen tomorrow. I think it's going to be even warmer than today, so it also depends a bit on how the tires are going to behave.
All right, good luck.
Just listen to that cheer. The American fans have come out here in Miami. They are delighted to see Charles Leclerc in pole position, Carlos Sainz second, and Max Verstappen will start third, with his teammate Sergio Perez in fourth place. It is all set up to be a fabulous duel around this amazing Miami International Autodrome. Make sure you join us tomorrow here from the Hard Rock Stadium. Our coverage will begin at about 8:05. We'll be on the grid. The list of celebrities is quite phenomenal, so we'll see what we can do out there, and then the race gets underway at 8:30, so make sure you join us. It should be a really good evening. We wish you the very best of evenings tonight. Thank you for being with us. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.